Everyone, this is Trial Talk, Clinical Research Simplified YouTube channel. And in the series of interview with experts, we have Mr. Kishan Nandha today. He's a director of pharmacovigilance, and we'll be asking some questions from him and learning from his journey in the industry. So welcome, Kishan. Welcome to the channel.
Thank you very much for having me, Suneet. It's a pleasure to interact with you. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, Kishan. So we'll start by asking about something about yourself. So can you please tell us a bit about yourself and your role in the field of pharmacovigilance?
Absolutely. So I work as an associate director of pharmacovigilance quality assurance for a leading QA consultancy. We are a global firm. I started my career in the operations side of pharmacovigilance. So basically started with case processing, medical information, things like that, and gradually moved towards a quality side of pharmacovigilance. So I've been auditing various companies, their processes, their service providers, business partners for some time now.
Okay, awesome. What does a typical day look like for you in your role as a pharmacovigilance expert?
Right. So I think there are various operational domains in pharmacovigilance, as you may already know, of course. If you are into operations side, if you're case processing, your day typically starts with anticipating the workload. You know how many cases you have to process basically in a day. You can prioritize them depending upon the deadline. Of course, you have to take care of all of the parameters regarding quality because you have KPIs or KQIs within your organization, and we can get into that separately, of course. So it depends. If you are on the quality assurance side, such as myself, you're planning the audits before the audits are actually conducted. During the audit, it's a hectic schedule that you have to follow. Of course, you are preparing before the audit starts early in the morning. You get through with all of the discussions, document requests during the day. At the end of the day, you review them. And also then again, the cycle starts on the next day. So it really depends what domain you belong to. I think on the operation side, you have a little bit of more predictability, but on the quality assurance side, I think each audit is different.
Okay, thank you. So what are the key responsibilities and tasks in your job on a daily basis?
Absolutely. So yeah, I think when I was on the operations side, processing cases, writing aggregate reports, which is again another activity in pharmacovigilance, among several other domains such as signal detection, risk management plans. So in those days, my responsibilities basically included processing the case, so doing the data entry, understanding what are the reportability requirements, understanding the source document, basically. So you have a safety database that you are working with, and that is the bread and butter for you as long as you are in the operations, of course, at least on the case processing side. So key responsibilities would be making sure that you capture all the information, making sure you know the regulations around reportability, around assessment of seriousness, listedness, causality, and you deliver the case basically in a timely manner. Now that I am on the auditing side, my key responsibilities would be delivering the audit plan, the audit agenda, the pre-audit document requests to the auditee, review them before the audit starts. And during the audit, of course, we evaluate everything based on how the auditor responds, what auditee provides in terms of document requests. And then after that starts the report writing for the audit.
Is the quality assurance a part of the, the job profile of person who is starting a pharmacovigilance position? Like even in the entry level, there is a quality assurance component built on it. Like we have to ensure that the case quality is good. It has to meet a certain standard, right? And then
Absolutely.
Yeah, we have to prioritize the cases which they come deal with the most, serious cases first, for example, case fatalities, and then deal with the serious adverse events. Then, so deal with those cases first, submit the report to the supervisor for quality checks, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think no matter what you are doing or what domain you belong to in pharmacovigilance, quality is an integral aspect. Ours is a regulated industry, of course. So we are bound by timelines, and certain timelines are dictated by regulations. Other timelines would be dictated by your own processes within your company or your client's processes, let's say if you are a service provider company. So yes, timelines are of paramount importance. The other aspect is quality. So there are key quality indicators or key performance indicators as well. So you have to be always aware of what the regulatory requirements are and what the quality expectations are of all the deliverables that you're working on. So those two things obviously would go hand in hand right from the start, right from the start to the end of your workflow. And at the same time, of course, there are parameters such as, quality assurance. So if you run into any problems, non-compliances, you have to then work with a quality assurance department that helps you put together corrective preventive actions, helps you investigate what actually happened, what was the root cause. So QA typically sits independently from the operations side, but that obviously does not mean that quality is only the responsibility of quality assurance, as the culture has been changing now for the good. So quality culture, I think, is part of a lot of organizations now, and quality is being emphasized right from the operations from day one, from the first step in the work. But of course, there is a dedicated quality assurance department always at your disposal, and they play a part in reviewing all the quality aspects from time to time, whether it's an ongoing monitoring that they do when you are performing the task during your workflow, or they do the retrospective evaluations in form of audits.
Other than case processing and submitting of safety reports, what other things are required, for in the profile of pharmacovigilance associate?
Absolutely. So I think you can gradually transition into other domains such as writing aggregate reports, performing signal detection and signal management, writing risk management plans, contributing into risk minimization actions. So there are these domains that you can transition into. If you have a penchant for them, you can even start in those domains, of course, but a little bit of case processing knowledge would always be the prerequisite. So in my experience, I've also seen a lot of people who transition gradually from the case processing side, which is the core fundamental day-to-day responsibility, into some of these other more niche domains, such as identifying safety issues through signal detection. And in there as well, you may have a couple of different ways, qualitative investigation or quantitative investigation, of course. So you gradually learn those techniques and then execute them. And the same comes to writing aggregate reports, which is another big regulatory responsibility in pharmacovigilance. So all of those things can be definitely inculcated. It really depends whether you immediately start out in those domains or you gradually move from case processing to those niche domains through your experience and training.
Yeah, so regulatory inspections are triggered by sites which are high risk or enrolling too many patients. And internal audits are usually quality checks performed by the department, and the monitoring is from the sponsor side. They want to see everything is going on perfectly. What it triggers an audit in pharmacovigilance?
Right. So, of course, when we say pharmacovigilance spans across both the phases in clinical trials as well as in post-marketing. So once the drug is in market, you still have ongoing pharmacovigilance activities. Those are the regulations. Those are the requirements. So it really depends. Now, on the clinical trials side, of course, you have to have risk-based audits from time to time. And those sites that are, let's say, quote unquote, risky, they need to be focused on and audited quite frequently. So any non-compliances, any lapses in your key quality indicators or performance indicators may trigger the audit. You may have a safety concern as well, because of which you may need to do for-cause audit. And of course, aside from all of this, regulatory authorities also may come and inspect you from time to time just to see how things are going, of course, because they're responsible for ensuring compliance and approving your product if it meets all the requirements. Now, yeah, absolutely. So let me just adjust my screen first. Okay, so let's resume. So yes, as I was saying, the regulatory authorities also have a task of inspecting the organizations, basically marketing authorization holders or sponsors and their service providers. from time to time. On the post-marketing side, as you can imagine, once the drug is approved, you still have continuous pharmacovigilance obligations. So on the post-marketing side, ever since 2012 happened, basically pharmacovigilance GVP modules from EMA, companies or marketing authorization holders are now required to also have a 5-year auditing plan, which then gives birth to 1-year auditing plan. And following the risk-based approach, you can audit your internal processes, same for your affiliates in other countries and your service providers as well as your business partners. So those are indeed the regulatory requirements from some time now. And yes, companies are therefore required to audit frequently. And of course, those regulatory authorities also continue to audit these companies based on their own metrics.
Awesome, thank you. The next question is, what are some of the biggest challenges you face in pharmacovigilance and how do you address them?
Right. So I think fundamental thing is to really realize and resonate, at least to some minimum extent, what it is that we do and why it is that we do in drug safety or pharmacovigilance. Or I think that is true for any regulated industry, but in our field, such as pharmacovigilance, clinical trial, medical writing, regulatory affairs, we may lose sight of the importance or significance of why we do what we do if we don't really understand clearly or even remind ourselves from time to time. So I think the biggest challenge would be to allow the monotony of work to overwhelm you, basically, and not understand why what I'm doing is important. So once I think you resonate with the idea and the purpose behind this whole field and the domain, it will be easier for you to relate to the significance and the importance of everything that you do. But apart from that, of course, you have other challenges from time to time, such as evolution in tools and technology. So you have to really be vigilant and diligent in keeping on your learning, so that you can also be aware of everything that is going on in the industry now, and also acquire new skills that are going to be in demand or that are going to be relevant. So I think, yeah, those two things would definitely be a challenge for any individual in all of these fields. And you can, I think, proactively strategize to avoid those pitfalls.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, can you walk us through how you analyze and respond to a drug safety report?
Absolutely. So yeah, it's one of the fundamental activities in pharmacovigilance, which I think all the pharmacovigilance professionals would be aware of if they didn't have any direct experience in it. Even then, I'm sure they would have a lot to do with the case processing workflow. So it all starts from receipt of safety information. There can be various sources, as the regulations say. You have a medical information call center of the company, which can be run by, again, the company itself or the service provider, doesn't matter. I think both are perceived in the eyes of regulations as the accountability of the ultimate marketing authorization holder. So I think it doesn't make a difference there. So those are the touch points where you can receive the safety information. And when I say safety information, it of course means case, ICSR, or individual case safety information. But basically, it's just very easy to not categorize a case early in the workflow and just call everything safety information. So that becomes sort of a standard term industry-wise for all types of adverse event reports. So yes, once you receive that, you may receive, of course, safety information from other sources such as literature. You have to screen literature, which is also a regulatory requirement. Similarly, your medical representatives may learn about safety information side effects from their field work. So all of these sources, basically, once you have a safety database that collects the information, that's when the actual work starts of case processing workflow. It then leads to, of course, triaging, so that you can figure out what would be the reporting requirements for a particular safety event report. You can prioritize the workflow or a particular case accordingly. So there are workflow managers or team leads also keeping a track of everything that has been received and everything that is needing to be prioritized. Then, of course, after triaging, there are steps such as data entry. Everything needs to be quality checks, so QC. That too, through an independent reviewer is necessary. medical reviewers, where physicians such as yourself also perform the analysis of safety information, basically with respect to coding, but also more importantly, seriousness, expectedness, causality. All of those parameters are evaluated and documented inside the case. And once the case is completed, along with the narrative that we also have to write, apart from all the data entry that we do in various fields, there's a narrative text, free text field that is also in the safety database where we describe what actually happened with set parameters. It needs to be then submitted to regulatory authorities, perhaps to your business partners as well. And once that is done, the workflow takes a pause, of course, until you get another follow-up information regarding the same patient, another report, basically. And then you have to also incorporate that in the next version of the case. But that's typically the workflow from start to end with regard to a case.
Yeah, thank you for such a comprehensive overview of the whole process. This is a joke comes to my mind that I was in a conference and one of the pharmacovigilance experts was chatting with, he said that if a person calls you on the phone and you are on a dinner with your wife, and then you have to, if you document information on a piece of napkin, that becomes a source document for that
Exactly. Exactly. And
and he also said that if you're having an adverse event, don't tell me, because now I have to document it and have to put it into the system. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, those specifics are certainly incorporated in regulations, and oftentimes when I visit companies, marketing authorization holders, or their service providers, I think service providers are in the business of meeting all of those obligations, so they would have done their homework. But I think a lot of new companies at times they may not realize such specifics. And yes, as you said, everybody that works for the company, or everybody that is hired by the company, even as a service provider or a consultant, if you are made aware of any safety information, any side effect, any adverse experience of any individual on that drug, and if you're made aware of that, it becomes your regulatory obligation to have it reported. So nowadays, of course, there is this annual recurring training provided within the organization to all the employees, so that they can be constantly reminded of such responsibilities. And suffice it to say that when I also perform the audits, or regulatory inspectors also evaluate the companies, in those instances, we also go and make sure that, yes, and not only just the safety department or the clinical trial department, but also your medical representatives, everybody who has this potential of coming across safety information is aware through a documented training what they need to do when they come across a report. So indeed, yes, that's a requirement.
okay, so let's move on to the next question. Which other departments and healthcare professionals do you collaborate with? Like, I know all work is teamwork. And would you explain a little bit what are the key stakeholders? Definitely patients are one, but you never get to talk to the patients directly. But you are communication with other associates, and how would that collaboration look like?
Absolutely. So I think, yeah, there are a few touch points that anybody would have as part of the member of any drug safety teams, of course. So you have a medical information department that collects the initial information, and more often than not, those are the calls that they receive for any medical inquiries. Should I take this medicine? This happened, that happened, what I should do. But in the conversation, they may refer to their own experience on the medicine, which is then, of course, becomes the safety information to be processed from start to end using the same workflow that I was just talking about. So yes, those associates do happen to speak to patients directly, patients' caregivers, or just other individual reporters, as well as healthcare professionals. And once they receive the safety information, it is their job to document it and provide it to the safety team for further handling and processing. So that's one touch point for sure. I think when it comes to aggregate reports, signal detection, risk management, there is a dedicated place in the workflow for safety physicians, physicians who do need to perform certain medical reviews using their medical expertise. So that's another type of stakeholder that you commonly see within any drug safety department. And other than that, of course, when you go out and execute your risk minimization obligations, such as REMS programs that you have within the US mandated by FDA, additional risk minimization measures that are mandated by EMA. So those actions will require you to also send out and interact with healthcare professionals in the field for specific purposes, of course, and each REMS or RMP determines what the exact requirement is. So there are some commonalities, of course, but specific requirements might differ from one program to another. So during those initiatives, all we are trying to make sure is we are educating the patients, we are educating healthcare professionals regarding the drug, as well as we are doing the data collection in a specific way if required because of a particular safety concern for a drug. So those also become the touch point. Interesting enough, I have been into FDA REMS auditing as well lately, I think since 3 or 4 years. So that gives me the opportunity to also go on behalf of these marketing authorization holders that have drugs with REMS programs. So I get to go out to hospitals and clinics and see how the drug is being utilized, if they are documenting all the elements regarding the drug and their usage and the prescription and the distribution, of course, or rather dispensing, I should say, or not, as required by the FDA. So I get to talk to them. I get to understand how they run their operations inside the clinic, inside the hospital. And at the same time, I also get to, at times, educate them as to why we need to focus on these particular REMS requirement. But not only that, you need to be able to also document appropriately what you have done so that inspectors and auditors can objectively verify you're meeting the requirements. So sometimes, of course, it becomes really interesting to have those conversations with those healthcare professionals that are not typically involved in pharmacovigilance.
Okay, so essentially we have the physicians who are reviewing, we have a medical information department who is communicating with the patients, we have regulatory agency personnel,
Yes, absolutely.
we have auditors, and probably you'll be having connection with Health Canada where you're submitting reports and people are getting in touch, and right?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
you visit the sites and then you have a communication and connection with those people on the sites as well, right?
Absolutely. So that's a nice way to put it, in fact. So as far as, if you just zoom out a bit, the number of stakeholders would be, yes, the regulatory authorities. If you are a company that is only located and marketing products in a particular territory or a country, then the regulatory authority of that region or that country becomes the priority for you. But of course, if you are a global company, then you need to account for all the regulatory requirements across the world wherever you are going to market your products. But not only that, the other stakeholders are your service providers. Like I said, the regulators do not really make a distinction that you have outsourced these activities. So now it's not your responsibility anymore. No, you're more than allowed to outsource everything or part of your portfolio, but you still remain accountable for having that oversight. So those service providers, at the same time, if you have marketing partners, distributing partners in other countries, those different pharmaceutical companies, just because they are co-marketing, co-developing, or co-distributing the products in those other countries, those also become touch points and stakeholders for you. Your internal employees, of course, and through the nature of various pharmacovigilance activities that you do, member of the healthcare community also become important stakeholders from time to time.
Okay, all right. Awesome. So next question is, can you share a particularly impactful or memorable experience you had in your career regarding pharmacovigilance?
Right. So as I was saying, when I got to understand pharmacovigilance after a couple of years of exposure, I really got to understand what it's all about, and I could vibe or rather resonate with the idea behind all the activities. And after I made the transition into quality assurance, so mainly auditing of pharmacovigilance activities, I got to be involved in various audits, which were in fact quite crucial before two companies could merge. So we call them due diligence audits. So one such example definitely comes to mind, where I was representing a company that was trying to acquire or merge with another entity. And they wanted to proactively perform the due diligence pharmacovigilance audit just to make sure what the prevailing safety concerns are for the products, how their PV department is organized. And that was of paramount importance because the company that was trying to acquire or merge with another entity, my client, they did not want to take on any product portfolio or any processes that already had more than a significant number of lapses or gaps, because then, of course, it becomes your regulatory burden, it becomes your own risk, which you need to mitigate, and you do not want to go get into any regulatory trouble. So once I got to do that audit, it's my responsibility to objectively, factfully report all the findings along with the rationale and the evidence, of course. And it came to a decision on their side that that they're not going to go through with the merger as well as the acquisition or whichever it was out of the two. So yes, that one audit resulted in the impact on the whole business relationship between the companies, and also my client could spare the trouble of all the non-compliances, which would have been their non-compliances had the merger had gone through. So they could spare themselves from all of those burdens. And of course, we could spare our patients from such risky products by not distributing or co-marketing those products in those other territories if everything was not in order in the first place. So yeah, that was a memorable experience. And I got to also firsthand realize what it can mean at times, even directly in front of your eyes, when pharmacovigilance activities are being done in compliance versus they're not being done in compliance.
Mergers and acquisitions, it's a whole separate topic, in
Absolutely.
the pharma industry. We'll probably have another session with someone discussing in detail about that. They are stressful, and it's stressful for employees. All these regulatory processes have to be reevaluated. They will evaluate the positions, people are working in title roles change, and it's, yeah. And bigger companies acquire smaller companies so that to merge their profits into their own, and it's like a whole complicated, right? So complicated.
Absolutely. And I think companies in principle do not want to get involved in such scenarios where the safety of their product is not on par, or let's say the benefit risk ratio that we talk about in our field basically is not in our favor, because then, of course, you are inviting troubles for yourself, but more than anything else, you are just endangering the public health. And it's not just about your reputation or the trouble that you would go through as a company, but it's also about the noble cause overall, which is to ensure that we are not deliberately or neglectfully harming the patients. We are in the business of helping patients. And so absolutely, we need to be vigilant and do everything that we can to avoid any safety concerns.
Okay. So next question is, how have you seen the field of pharmacovigilance evolve over the course of your career?
That's a very interesting question, in fact. And I think within the span of last 25, 30 years, and not that my career has been that long, but I've definitely talked to other people who have seen the evolution of field throughout those years. I definitely got to learn that initially it was all about paper documentations, in the 90s and perhaps even in the early 2000s. Gradually, we moved from those to all the electronic systems, and now we have dedicated, validated systems for the right purposes in pharmacovigilance. So you have not only safety databases, you have data mining tools for signal detection, signal management. You have workflow management tools as well at your disposal so that you can effectively track your compliance or also mitigate gaps. You have document management tools. So suffice it to say that there has been a lot of advancement in the tools and technologies that we use in our field, and catching up with the progress or keeping track of all the advancements basically becomes a very important responsibility for anybody in the field, because it's constantly evolving. And at the same time, on the other side, not only just tools and technologies, regulations have also emerged over the period of last 20 years. ICH countries, the US FDA, EMA, Health Canada, Japan, PMDA, TGA, Australia. So all of these countries were leading the regulatory setup or the regulatory requirements basically for all the marketing authorization holders. And now you see a lot of smaller or a lot of new countries also joining the requirements of pharmacovigilance so that they can ensure drug safety in their countries as well. So it's a constant evolution on both sides, what is required in terms of regulatory requirements and how you effectively meet those obligations by using new tools and technologies every now and then. Yes.
Yeah, so policies and procedures and technological advances definitely is the hallmark of the changes that happen. So, does there any change you saw in the SOPs as well, like the company policies and how you handle things? Have there been any improvement on those?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's company's own responsibility to periodically evaluate their standard operating procedures, work instructions, but suffice it to say their procedural documents overall, and keep them in check so that they can enable your compliance. They need to give actionable and specific and clear, not ambiguous instructions. So there is a regulatory requirement across the world that then requires you to constantly or periodically check your SOP for any updates as required. And you need to show that to the auditor and the inspector. And that's one of the fundamental things that we check in any quality management system evaluation. So yes, as the regulatory requirements change, companies generally have a process for regulatory intelligence. So they are constantly looking for any updates in the requirements themselves. And when they come across any changes, they do need to perform the evaluation of their own procedures so that they can make sure the procedures are capable of meeting that requirement. If not, they constantly need to also keep updating the procedure based on the regulatory requirement. So yes, anytime a regulatory requirement comes about, whether it's a new or an updated requirement, companies do find out. They have a process for that, and then they change or update their SOPs or bring in new procedural documents as well to meet those requirements. So it's a constant evolution for sure.
I see a lot of job postings in which quite a lot of these positions are actually work from home. So is it possible to do this job completely independently from your home office, or do you need to be organization for these?
I think many of the activities are perfectly doable from the comfort of your home. Obviously, it would require your diligence in the same manner. Just like what you would do in the office, you would still be required to do the same things when you're working from home. So there's absolutely no difference in the delivery from what I can imagine. But yes, many of the activities can be done from home. Now, of course, audits, inspections, meetings, all of those activities would require your physical participation from time to time. But yes, I think it depends on the company policies, how they manage, whether it's a hybrid setting where you can work from home for all of those activities that don't require your physical presence, and then be on the facility or be on the road for any activities that do require your physical presence. But yes, I think you can definitely compartmentalize and enjoy working from home if your company allows it.
Okay. What advice would you give to someone who is interested in pursuing a career in pharmacovigilance?
Right. So number one thing, I would go back to what I was saying earlier. You do need to resonate, or in the recent colloquial term, vibe with the idea behind the field. Because if you don't have that, you'll quickly lose motivation, and especially after a few initial years, if you don't have that idea as to why what you are doing matters and what you are doing is required by the regulatory authorities and your internal company requirements. So I think that's the prerequisite. So definitely ask yourself, if this is for you, and if you cannot really vibe with the idea behind the field. I'm sure there are other fields as well, but yes, if you do, there's nothing like it. You get to contribute in public health, whether you are part of the operations or you're part of quality assurance, which is what I do, one audit at a time. So you get to definitely make an impact and contribute in this noble cause. But apart from that, if you have also penchant for complex regulatory documents, as in penchant for reading them, reviewing them, understanding them, you can certainly work on that. But yes, that would be helpful, because all you'll be doing, whether you're in the operations side or you're on side of pharmacovigilance quality assurance, you need to understand the regulatory requirements in the first place. So that means you have to spend enough time in reviewing the regulatory documents. Sometimes if they're in different languages, you also need the translation, which can be made available, of course. But of course, you need to still invest that effort, that amount of effort into understanding the regulatory requirements and figuring out how they apply or how they execute. Critical thinking and communication skills, those two elements are also important. So I think if you're able to comprehensively communicate verbally as well as effectively over emails and in other technologies and tools, then it does come in handy when it comes to overall process coming together to produce that final deliverable. And certain tasks such as investigation for a non-compliance as part of corrective preventive actions or even audits, those require you to apply your critical thinking skills and to understand what was required, what was done, what was the gap, and what was the root cause, and now what we can do to fix this issue and get back on track of compliance. So yeah, I think critical thinking, communication skills, I believe the ability to stick to learning about regulations and executing those requirements. And lastly, like I said, a little bit of motivation that comes from, the realization of the purpose behind all of it. All of these things come in handy for young professionals, yes.
What education backgrounds and experience would be a good match for someone who's trying to enter into this field?
Right. I think it depends on the territory or the country or even companies that you're part of. But generally, an education in science, especially on the pharma side, if you have education or background in pharmaceuticals, it would be certainly relevant for you to consider this as one of the options. Of course, healthcare professionals, physicians, nurses, pharmacists, they have unique roles to play in various activities. So you will see a lot of healthcare professionals, also those who do not want to perhaps continue with their healthcare practices. They definitely make a transition at some point to such activities in pharmacovigilance. So yes, those would be the other demographic. But other than that, it boils down to your training and your experience. So even if you didn't have any relevant educational qualification, it doesn't mean that you cannot enter. If you are passionate about the field, you can certainly get an entry-level job as a young person and continue to be trained, continue to take courses, continue to meet people, learn from them, participate in conferences. And once you have enough experiences, I think there won't be much difference. Or it wouldn't really matter if you began your career or education in pharmaceuticals or you did not.
Awesome. Thank you. Next question is, what future trends or changes do you anticipate in pharmacovigilance, and how are the companies and professionals preparing for those?
Right. So there's been a lot of buzz in every field, I'm saying, about artificial intelligence and automation. So that is also the buzz in pharmacovigilance. So I think a lot of changes are anticipated. It's not going to happen overnight. So I definitely don't mean to suggest that something is going to happen overnight, but definitely with a decent pace, eventually we are going to see introduction of new tools with respect to every domain and every activity of pharmacovigilance. And so adaptability would be of paramount importance. So those sort of changes are anticipated. And at the same time, you will see also a lot of the new countries joining these ICH countries and those other countries that have pharmacovigilance regulations. So you will see an uptick in audits, inspections in those other countries as well. And so together, I think after a point, you will have more of a regulatory or pharmacovigilance requirements or activities for a company going on across the world, not just in few countries. So yeah, hopefully we're going to get there at some point, and yeah, we'll still be able to manage the global compliance as the professionals in the field effectively and well.
Yeah, I did a presentation on artificial intelligence and clinical research, and while I was doing research for the presentation, I found that there are certain AI models which can actually scavenge the internet and do literature search for the side effects which are happening, compile a report which would have taken hours or probably weeks for somebody to do them on their own. and it's definitely gonna help, the use of AI. AI is being used in all different subsectors of research, right from preclinical to clinical and post-market surveillance and into all activities.
Right.
So adaptability is very good point. So I was obviously to be in this kind of field, where the change is happening, so we need to be flexible and willing to learn. So become a lifelong learner, right?
Yeah. Absolutely, and I think it's good that we are part of a field that has a lot to offer. That is significant, of course, in its core, but it's also evolving. So not only just the industry stakeholders or the service industry or the pharmaceutical industry, but also regulators are learning along with all of us. And that's why you see a lot of regulatory agencies, putting out guidances for public consultation. So they definitely want to hear from industry stakeholders and academics so as to craft the regulatory requirement, the whole setup in a most suitable and the compatible way, and it should serve the purpose. So one of the things that we need to remind ourselves is, if we are coming up with a process or as regulators, regulatory requirements, is it fit for purpose? The idea is not to, come up with red tapes and make every single thing too extremely difficult to document or too extremely difficult to execute. That is definitely not the idea, but you need to have certain controls that are necessary to ensure the compliance. And the compliance is important to, of course, make sure that our products are safe and we are not endangering the public health, and the companies can conduct their business without any regulatory trouble. So yes, all of it does have a purpose. So definitely you will see changes and updates in regulations. And at the same time, when new technology and tools are introduced into all of these workflows, you will also see regulations in the hindsight coming that would then tell you, you can do this, but you have to do this as well. Then you can do this, but certain other things you cannot do. So yeah, it's all going to be a very interesting journey from now to perhaps a couple of more decades.
There's a pharmacovigilance of the marketed products, and then there's pharmacovigilance of the products which are in clinical trials, right?
Yes,
Are
absolutely.
there any essential differences between how you perform, or the processes are exactly the same for both of them?
I think many of the core principles of what you do remain the same, but there are specific differences and requirements. So in the clinical trial, of course, there are 7-day and 15-day submission, depending upon what type of safety information you have received. So if you have a clinical trial going on a site, and if there is a report of a subject that experienced life-threatening condition, for example, such a report would need to go to the regulatory agency. Again, it depends which regulatory agency we are talking about, but I think more or less the requirement you would see would be submission of that safety information through all the workflow steps that we were just talking about, basically. So the output does need to look like what it needs to look like as per the regulatory requirement. So it needs to be submitted to those authorities in 7 days usually. Then there is a 15-day requirement, which is also the requirement on the post-marketing side, certain cases that are serious and unexpected. Those would need to be reported to regulatory authorities on 15 days. There's not a 7-day requirement on the post-marketing side, generally speaking. So yes, there are these nuances that are different, but in principle, I think it all comes to processing the case from its receipt to the submission and handling it basically appropriately as the regulatory requirements dictate. So in a nutshell, if you're working on the clinical trial side, for example, and in the US, you would need to refer to 21 CFR 312. Basically, that would be 312.32. That's the specific CFR for safety submission from clinical trial. If you were to be working on the post-marketing, similar requirements, but then the CFRs would be 21 CFR part 314, basically. And so those would be the set of regulations and requirements that you would be focusing on specifically. Yes.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I was watching a TED talk yesterday on, like the reportability of the results of clinical trials. We all understand the importance of submitting these side effects from medication so that the safety and the for public health and the interests of the common man. So what happened is that 50% of the results of the negative clinical trials are not even never published. So this is a great concern because many of the medications which are being used, marketed, we do not have all results of all the clinical studies that are actually conducted on that particular molecule. So what would be your like comment or suggestion on this?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. It's obvious that in clinical trials, companies can only test the medicine on so many individuals, whether it's from phase one to phase two or phase two to phase three, basically. Generally, the medicine or the therapeutic entity would have been tested on a few thousand people, and that's nearly not enough to guarantee with confidence that the drug is going to be 100% safe once it comes out in the market, because it will be exposed to a lot of new demographics which haven't been tested, which weren't part of the sample or the subject groups. And of course, when a molecule or a drug spends years going through making rounds through population, you may realize that a particular demographic or people with specific conditions have more vulnerability when it comes to side effects of that medicinal entity. So all of those things would need to be identified, would need to be recognized while the product is being used by the population. And that's why, of course, pharmacovigilance came about, or we basically regulatory authorities of countries gave birth to this idea of drug safety, even being important for the post-marketing phase. So yeah, that is indeed the motivation, and that's why it's constantly required for as long as the drug is in the market to be aware of the benefit risk profile for that medicine.
Okay, thank you. We have discussed a little bit about the technology and the importance of regulations to so a pharmacovigilance associate need to have a sound understanding of both to what the regulations in the area of country in which they're operating apply to them and submit all the safety reports and do case processing as per the requirements. Also to understand the different new technologies coming in, new software. Could you elaborate a little bit more on what kind of different software which are used in like, for example, I heard Argus is a very popular one, and if somebody needs to work in the industry, do they need to get like a training prior, or would they be trained on site? And what how hard it is, how much time does it take for them to master these skills?
Absolutely. Excellent question. And something that I get asked when I get a chance to speak to people from other domains in healthcare industry and pharmaceuticals wanting to transition into pharmacovigilance, or even when I speak to a few of my friends, younger brothers who are right now in colleges and considering pharmacovigilance or quality assurance or regulatory affairs as their career. So yeah, I think it has been the case so far that once you get an entry-level job, you would be trained in all the prevailing tools and technologies, especially those that are being used in your company. Although lately there have been a lot of teaching institutions, consultancies, courses, conferences, even YouTube videos put up on these subjects. So you can very well be trained proactively without even getting your first job in the field on such fields. But of course, it sometimes becomes difficult because it's such a new phase that we're into now. We are ramping up our educational initiatives and training initiatives for all of these finer details of the field. It is possible to proactively train yourself before you enter the job market, but it sometimes often becomes the case that once you enter a company, they are going to be performing pharmacovigilance activities. So you will be part of that process, that workflow, and you will certainly be trained in detail with regard to the usage of all of those systems that are playing role in that process. So Argus, as you mentioned, RSG, those are very popular, safety databases. And safety databases are the tools that handle safety information or individual report of adverse event from start to end until it is received, entered, quality checked, medically reviewed, and of course then submitted. So yes, that becomes the primary tool in pharmacovigilance. Other than that, if you look at signal evaluation and signal management, which is nothing but a review of all the aggregate data to identify any new safety concerns, any new trends or patterns through various mechanisms. Of course, there can be qualitative evaluation and there can be quantitative evaluation through data mining, and we can get into that even separately, of course. But so those tools perform the exact same task of executing the qualitative and/or quantitative evaluation of safety concerns or unidentified or previously unidentified safety concerns for a medicinal product. So there are various tools in market already. That is where a new tool, I won't take the name, but that is where a series of new tools are also being introduced every now and then that deploy artificial intelligence to identify what sort of signals or what sort of safety concerns can happen or can be identified going forward. And there are predictive models as well available that are being now tested. So a lot of exciting thing is happening. And those are the pharmacovigilance tools. And there are many more, of course. But on the other side, when you come to quality management system, how your procedures are being managed, how your training is being managed and delivered, and not only that, but documented, how your non-compliances are being documented and what you do about them, basically corrective and preventive actions, how those are going to be tracked until those are completed. And then you can also demonstrate through the evidence of those task completions that, yes, you indeed fixed the problem. So all the activities on the quality management system side as well, including audits, they also need to be documented so that we can demonstrate we have done it. And there are many solutions in the market, many big players also that have entered the market to offer their technology so that we can do all of these quality system activities too, just like pharmacovigilance activities, but in a compliant manner and in a more efficient manner. So yeah, there are a plethora of tools nowadays with respect to what we had, for example, 10, 15 years ago.
So the quality management tools are built in within the safety management reporting, or is it separate?
No, they are more or less separate tools for separate activities. Now, there can be some touch points or some intersections where two platforms can, interact with each other for specific purposes, such as safety database versus, signal detection. Against all the cases that you have, the aggregate data is the source for signal evaluation, more or less, generally speaking. So you may see that those two databases are connected. They don't need to be necessarily, but sometimes it's more efficient. And so they're built that way that they can talk to each other and you don't have to extract all the information from one system and dump it into another system. And it avoids that manual task, basically. The database can talk to each other. When it comes to quality management system, I think each specific responsibility requires that you have a tool meant for it. So if there is a tool that can track how you update, how you review, how you approve, how you quality check your procedures, and how you distribute your procedures among your employees, there will be a tool for that. Having said that, now on the quality management side as well, there are big players that are offering the electronic quality management system. So the whole suite of technologies all combined or wrapped into one. And I'm not the IT experts, might be messing up on the terminologies, of course, but then the idea is that, you buy the whole package, the gamut of tools and technologies, and then part of it is going to be fit for document management. The other part is going to be fit for, learning management, as in the training delivery and the training documentation. And then there's this other module part of it that is going to be specifically designed for how you document your corrective and preventive actions and root cause analysis of your deviations. So there can be some interactions in a nutshell to summarize everything. But yes, those activities will still be performed in their individual dedicated modules.
Thank you for explaining that. I know that there are different reporting systems, so we just want to explore a little bit about the global variations in like how does different countries manage like Europe versus American system. So there's like different reporting, like US FDA has VARES, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, and Canada have their own platform. Are there any essential differences on reporting these safety, like incidents, and are there differences in processes? For example, you work for FDA, you work for other countries, for Canada. So what did you find the differences across, like what are the different perspectives?
Right. And that's a very good question, in fact. And that's an ongoing battle for all the pharmacovigilance individuals or professionals as well. You need to not only be aware of regulatory expectations of one territory and country, but you also need to be aware of multiple of such territories or countries if your organization or your service provider organization working for the ultimate marketing authorization holder has that exposure of products in different countries. So that becomes necessary that you submit all the information in not just one country, but various countries as per their individual regulatory requirements. So I think what I've seen is, in principle, the requirements are harmonized more or less. There's a long way to go when it comes to specifics, but the submission requirement for safety information or individual case safety reports, the submission requirement for aggregate reports, they are similar in principle, but frequencies, the timelines, the deadlines, and the elements of contents, they differ from time to time. So yes, that's one classic difference. In any case, it would be of paramount importance to proactively identify which regulatory agency requirements you are concerned with within your organization. And there are documents that would guide you as to what you would need to do when it comes to each deliverable and where it needs to be submitted across the world. And so depending upon that, you have to be mindful that you are not only meeting your obligations in the territory where you are perhaps located, but at the same time, you have also met the obligation that you have in all of the other territories and countries. So yes, you do need to delineate and at times be mindful of the specific requirements. When it comes to EMA, there are detailed guidance documents available for regulatory expectations, specifically if we talk about, EMA GVP modules in pharmacovigilance. So 16 modules, that they basically tell you in detail with regard to each activity required in pharmacovigilance, how you should do it, what are the expectations, how you should document it. Yes, and when it comes to FDA side, of course, there's not an apple-to-apple comparison. There are no GVP modules or FDA modules, but then there are 20 CFRs that you need to review and understand, and at the same time, there are FDA guidance documents as well. The principle, again, you would find a lot of similarities in there, but certain nuances might be different. So make sure that you are aware of all the regulatory requirements, and not only that, those sources of regulations, whether it's CFR, GVP modules, or FDA guidance documents, they are readily accessible by you, because you will need to refer to them from time to time to make sure that, yes, not only you are meeting requirements generally, but you are also paying attention to specific requirements in specific countries, and there will be some from time to time.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Kishan. So there's a question comes to mind. Like I did a postgraduate course in clinical research and a postgraduate course in regulatory affairs from Humber. I don't think so there was any courses in specifically in pharmacovigilance at that time, and very few universities or colleges are actually conducting these courses. So if someone has to um, like enter into the career, do they need to have specialized training prior to, or they need to spend a year learning about the regulations, or is it will they can learn the thing on the job, like just having the backgrounds and experience you advised, and they can enter into the field right away without going through 1 year course, a postgraduate certificate course from a community college?
Right. So I think if you have a relevant background, if you're part of pharmaceuticals or healthcare industry, then you can immediately start applying for the jobs. And once you are part of any organization, they would need to conduct all the activities in compliance with the regulations. So you get to learn every single thing, obviously, the technologies and tools that are deployed in those organizations, as well as the regulatory agency requirements that they are fulfilling across the world. So I think that is definitely the best way you can be trained while you are doing the activities. And there are training programs, again, documented, supported by training plans or training matrices that will tell you, what you need to be trained on before you can perform certain activities. So I think all of those requirements are also outlined in the regulations. So whenever you become part of a company and it's your first job, you will have to go through certain trainings, and then becomes your onus, of course, to pay attention, learn things quickly, and execute. And of course, when you make mistakes, go back, correct yourself, and then do a better job. Having said that, these days, there are training institutions, coaching institutions, even consultancies available in the market. So if you have resources at your disposal, and if you do want to take up, self-learning or learning through all of these other paid options, consultancies or courses on Udemy, there are courses on LinkedIn as well. There are conferences that you can participate, pay for, and they run courses ahead of the conference or as part of the conference sessions. So all of those things, depending upon what your learning gap is or what it is that you want to start with, you can definitely identify. But of course, it becomes your responsibility to then invest the time, energy, money behind those learning initiatives. So if you are able to do that, absolutely proactively prepare yourself for doing wonders in this field. If not, definitely start with your review of the regulatory requirements, specifically FDA requirements. If you're interested in case processing, figure out, talk to other professionals what regulatory requirements or specific guidance documents you should go through. Same on the EMA side, definitely read all the GVP modules that you can. And it's okay if you do not understand the context or the finer details just yet, but they will resonate with you once you are performing those activities and once you are officially trained by your employer for those activities. So yes, do get a head start if you can. And then, of course, you will have to go through the rigorous training to be on par, to be up to the mark anywhere.
Does becoming a member of International Society of Pharmacovigilance helps to get the perspectives for newcomers who want to start their career in BV?
100%, 100%. So yes, I think being member of those organizations and participating in their conferences, like I was saying, is indeed helpful. I am a member of a couple of organizations myself, although I don't get to participate in each conference as much as I like to now. But initially, if your employer has the resources to send you to different training programs to have you become member of such institutions, so that you can then have access to their training material, their guidances, their events. And events can be, again, enrichment of your skill, and you can also network with like-minded professionals to continue your learning in the field. So those things are certainly helpful. Definitely figure out what it is that you intend to get out of such activities. There are specific conferences built also for QA portion of activities. There are specific conferences also for the operation side of pharmacovigilance, and then there are general conferences as well. So figure out, talk to the professionals and figure out what is being offered by which institution or organization, and what sort of membership and participation would help you in learning those activities. And then accordingly, of course, you can go ahead and become the member of one or two or even more institutions. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. So a little bit of a personal question. So what made you choose the career of pharmacovigilance? How did you, when did you start? Like, what attracted you to the field?
Yeah. So I'm not going to say that ever since I grew up, I wanted to be in pharmacovigilance, because that would be a lie. So let me not say that. It definitely happened by accident, because I don't think this being a very dynamic and innovative as well as new field, growing up, I had even the idea that such a thing exists. So after we grow up and ditch the idea or just go with it in a separate direction. But for most people like us, I think after we ditched the idea of becoming a cricketer, or in my case, I wanted to be an astronaut, which was not at all a serious thought at that point in time. But after we drop all of those amateurish ideas, I had the first serious thought of studying pharmacology and pursuing PhD in pharmacology, and especially working on Alzheimer's disease, basically, or research around that, because I think, in my family, a very unfortunate situation because of this disease, and then that gave me personal motivation to, take up that route. But then, coincidentally, I also was introduced to regulatory affairs and pharmacovigilance. And when I started working in a company while I was preparing for further education, my PhD, I was actually gradually very enchanted with the idea of pharmacovigilance. And the more I read about it, sulfanilamide tragedy, how the Food, Drug, and Safety Act came about in 1936-37, what happened in thalidomide tragedy in 1960s, and why drug safety is important and what needs to be done even going forward. Even now, you have cases where certain drugs need to be withdrawn from market, and it happens because previously we didn't know that there was going to be a concern, and now through pharmacovigilance we identified that yes, this is in fact a concern big enough, so that we don't have benefit risk ratio of this product in our favor, and there is more risk rather than the benefit, so let's withdraw the product. So that has also happened for a few medicinal or more than few medicinal entities. And yes, so that's why of course our field, what we do, is important. So once I got to understand after a couple of years, I there was no looking back, basically. So yeah, since that time it really worked out, and I think I found what I am potentially good at and what I can contribute in after that initial couple of years of experience.
Thank you. So we touched upon this a little bit earlier, the kind of skills which we need to essential for success in the field of pharmacovigilance. So you mentioned critical thinking, attention to detail. I think the problem solving ability to be able to write reports. You mentioned communication skills, good communication skills, and the core values of why we are doing this, like the drive to help because your work is helping, and to become above the monotony of doing things, like on a daily basis. Do you have
Absolutely.
anything to add to these skills?
No, I think for anybody starting out, I would just keep things simple. It all starts with the idea as to why you think this would work out well for you, or do you have the right aptitude for this? Because you are going to be more or less working on your devices using different tools and technologies, sometimes even the simple ones, of course, a Word file, PDF, or whatnot. You are going to be working on all of those tools and technologies to meet certain regulatory requirements. It's definitely not a field work, except for the part when you go out and have meetings, or when I go out and audit and be on the road for that specific purpose. So definitely identify if this is what would resonate with you in terms of your career expectations. There is tremendous growth potential. There's a good amount of money as well to be made in the field. So all of those things are in your favor. All you would need would be, the ability to keep learning. And that can happen seamlessly if you are on board with the idea as to why you're doing and why it matters. So start with that, of course. Communication, definitely focus on that. Basic computer literacy. I don't think that in today's time, especially students or youngsters, they would be falling short of that. But then, just in case if you are, just augment your computer literacy a little bit more, because no matter what, you would be working with computers and different tools and technologies. So basic understanding of such systems and computers overall would definitely be helpful. And more than anything else, get into the habit of a lot of reviews, a lot of interpretations of regulations, develop an eye for how to read regulatory or key legal documents. So work on those specific niche, and then I think you should be ready to make a move in the field. Once you are part of the field, depending upon what journey you have carved out for yourself, whether you are going for line management type of roles, you are staying in the operations, or you are, let's say, even moving to the niche fields of operations, signal detection, risk management, aggregate reports, you can then plan your journey from that point onward effectively well. But I think just to get into the field, these basic prerequisites, I think, should be enough.
Awesome. What would you consider some of the ethical considerations we face when we work in pharmacovigilance, and how do we address those?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So that's a very big question, in fact, that comes to mind from time to time when I especially go out and see the status of compliance at certain companies in their processes. So doing the right thing matters here. You should definitely have the idea that whatever it is that I'm doing has an ultimate, although indirect, but ultimate impact on public health. So we should be meeting all the compliance requirements, and they are in place for a reason. I have run into situations where, it can be seen people are performing activities, but they just fall short on documentation because either they just give up too easily or they think it's not that important. So understanding why documentation is important so that you can perform, objective evaluation that, yes, these things are happening. And it's not about you personally. It's all about, process meeting its goal. It's about the ultimate end goal. So understanding that and then not rejecting that burden of good documentation just because you are done with the activity. Who worries about documentation? No, that shouldn't be your approach. So you should have that ethical consideration that not only this, but I need to also take documentation of everything that I have done, communication of everything that I've done, reporting of everything that I've done in a compliant manner as well. I need to consider compliance there as well. And of course, there are specific compliance requirements for documentation part as well. So that is very important. When it comes to specifically, risk management activities, I've also noticed at certain places where, I think people have idea that, oh, this is one adverse event report, it's meaningless, it doesn't really matter. Oh, this is, a couple of adverse event reports. So what if they were late? It doesn't really matter. Maybe it doesn't matter, but of course, if in the long run, you never know, and you do not know what it might result into or what new finding it might lead to. Since you do not know that upfront, that is why you need to basically treat all the information, all the safety information equally importantly. Of course, process and submit as per the assigned timelines, but you cannot disregard or exercise your own judgment when you are dealing with such a regulated industry. So that's another thing. On the QA side, I can definitely point out that the compatibility, or rather the relations between the operations and quality assurance, although they have improved globally, and especially in other parts of the world, which wasn't the case so much before. There, the idea has changed that quality assurance or the quality team is not just here to find faults, but is actually the partner in quality. They help you meet the regulatory expectations for compliance in the right manner. If something goes wrong, they are there to also help you investigate the issues. And from time to time, they do the audits. And at the same time, auditors have also evolved in their mindsets where they do not generally think anymore that my job is to, find mistakes and it's a fault finding exercise. Yes, in a nutshell, it is. But it's not about, people doing wrong, but it's not about you catching mistakes of people. It's about you collaboratively identifying what should have happened versus what happened, and what can we do together to fix it. And you can just, point it out at the end of the audit. So that aspect, that everything has a common goal, whether you're on the operations side or you're on the quality side, these checks and balances are for a reason. And you shouldn't really take things personally. You shouldn't really worry about, the culpability. If something had happened, you do not need to hide. You do not need to sweep it under the rug so that you don't get blamed. The idea is definitely not to blame you. And if that happens within your organization, that is the problem, rather. So I think acquiring that mindset, that ethical conduct, is important in all aspects of our field. And we shouldn't really be compromising transparency because of any irrational fear. I think that understanding is also more important than anything else in our field.
Thank you. So we're coming to the end of our interview, and I have just one last question for you. What aspects of your job do you find most rewarding, and why?
Right. So personally, I enjoyed my time on the operations side of pharmacovigilance. So, when you have, your fixed schedule, you anticipate the workload and you honor your timelines, and you do the documentation of everything that you do properly. But ever since I have moved on to the quality assurance side, I get to audit different companies, business partners, service providers, and their internal processes and affiliates in various countries. And more recently, since last 3-4 years, like I was saying, even the healthcare facilities that are participating in REMS programs or RMPs, basically. So I think the reward in all of these is for me to understand how the whole healthcare system, the pharmaceutical system, actually comes together to at least try and attempt at solving the healthcare problems of the general population. And it feels good to be a small part of it. It feels good to identify issues that then that can be fixed subsequently, so that those companies again can keep their products safe and efficacious, and at the same time also can stay out of regulatory trouble and continue the focus on developing even newer therapies. So I think you get to be a small part of that, one audit at a time. It's a very rewarding feeling. And more than anything else, on the quality assurance side, specifically talking, you get to work on different problems on different days. So every audit is different. Every audit probably has also its own territories. Some audit probably has all the regulatory requirements that are applicable to that company from the US FDA only. Some global companies would have multiple regulatory requirements that they would need to follow from different territories. So understanding those, reading about those, refreshing your knowledge in those audits, and then looking at companies' processes and figuring out the issues or the non-compliances, that sort of becomes the whole problem-solving exercise in a nutshell at the end of the day. And that is indeed something that I've very grown to enjoy over the last period of let's say a decade. Yeah. So it's been really interesting and rewarding that I get to solve problems, apply my critical thinking abilities with the background of knowledge that I have from my education, and at the same time keep meeting new professionals and keep meeting new healthcare stakeholders so that I can also learn and enrich my knowledge from them. So it's really fascinating at the end of the day.
We covered a lot of ground today, and really appreciate you sharing your experience and wisdom over 4 years. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Like to say to the viewers before we disconnect?
No, I think this was great. Thank you very much for having me. And I make a point to network as much as I can. So thank you very much for connecting with me. I think I'm sure we're going to remain in touch. I am active on LinkedIn as well. So definitely let me know if I can learn from any one of you watching, or if there is anything that can be better discussed or understood. So I'm always up for those conversations. And I have a long way to go when it comes to many of the finer details of our field. I'm not even close to being exposed to every single thing. So yeah, let's definitely keep it up and be a responsible member of our field. Like I said, everything that we do does matter. And so we should definitely keep up learning and executing things in the most responsible and compliant manner possible.
Thank you, Kishan. It's wonderful to have you. Thank you so much again. So I'll be in touch.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
Okay, I'm going to start now. So hello, everyone.